Today's top picks from Reuters Breaking Views. The elephant in the French election room. The anti-reform and austerity vote is too big for the next president to ignore. And Nestlé stumps up $12 billion for some baby food. With me now to discuss these stories is Reuters Breaking Views' Peter Tal Larsen. Peter, you argue that the winner on May 6th in the second round of the French election will have to take into account the near 50% of those who voted against the austerity and reforms. It's going to be difficult to do that whilst having Germany, on the other hand, pressing them to do the exact opposite.
No, I think that's right. And by the way, let's work on the assumption that the winner in the next round will be François Hollande, the socialist candidate. But if you look at the results of the first round of the presidential election, the running order was pretty much as expected. Hollande first, Sarkozy second, and then the National Front third. But actually, if you add up the National Front vote, the far left vote, and you also sort of assume that some of the vote for Hollande was a kind of an anti-Sarko, a rejection of the consensus on austerity and on sort of the current approach to the Eurozone crisis, you actually can end up with almost 50% of the vote being a no vote, essentially, a kind of a rejection of Sarkozy and of his policies. And for Hollande, obviously he's in a fairly strong position to sweep up those votes and win a decisive second round victory. But that attitude he has to take into account when he's formulating his policies.
Does he have to, though? Because as we discussed last week, what tends to happen is the candidates say one thing to get into power. Once they're in power, reality is quite different, and they backtrack on much of what they had promised. I mean, we saw this in Brazil.
Yeah, no, you can do that. You can do the old trick where you get into government and you say, oh, it's much worse than we thought it was. We can't do all those things we promised. Or you say, oh, well, we can't do this because the Germans are kind of being difficult or whatever. But I think the rejection of Sarkozy is so overwhelming that really he has to. I think he has to take that into account. And the markets, to be clear, the markets are really not pricing any of this in at the moment. They're assuming that Hollande will basically be like Sarko, and that all the rhetoric is just that.
Okay, well, we'll find out on May the 6th. On to our second story. Nestlé paying $12 billion for Pfizer's baby unit. It sounds a lot, but is it?
Well, it is a lot. I mean, it's a lot for baby food, obviously, but it's also the multiple is that they're paying is 5 times the unit sales, which is a lot for any business. That's not a sort of .com business. Now, the reason they've done that is there's sort of 3 things really going on. The first thing is they got caught into a bidding war with Danone of France, and they bid each other up, and so the price that started sort of below $10 billion has now ended up close to 12. The second thing that's going on really is that Nestlé has a very strong balance sheet, and so it's basically going to fund this from cash and from a bit of borrowing, for which it says it will pay low single-digit interest rates. Nestlé is one of the strongest companies in the world. They can borrow this kind of money very cheaply. The third thing, really, and I think this is the driving factor here, is that for these big companies, emerging market growth is kind of desirable and hard to come by. There's very few acquisitions of this kind of size that can really make an impact on a company like Nestlé, that can actually get them access to the growth that they want in emerging markets, and particularly in China. So it's obviously a push into emerging markets and Asia. But M&A doesn't always work. In fact, it doesn't often work. So couldn't Nestlé have found something better to do, more productive to do with its pile of cash? Well, possibly, but I think this is the problem for these companies, is that they're generating so much cash and they're so under-leveraged anyway, really, compared to where they were before the crisis, that they're running out of options, things to do with their cash. They could buy back shares, they could pay bigger dividends, or they could sort of invest in things. But actually, they've just got too much cash and they don't know what to do with. And I think this is, for Nestlé shareholders, a bit worried about this. I think the consoling thought is that even if this acquisition doesn't deliver what it has been promised to deliver, it won't make a huge amount of difference for Nestlé.
Too much cash and not knowing what to do with it. Not a bad position to be in. Yeah. Peter, thank you very much. My thanks there to Reuters Breaking Views, Peter Tal Larsen. For more agenda-setting financial insight, watch our US Breaking Views show every day at 12:30 Eastern. That's 17:30 British Summer Time. I'm Jamie McGeever. This is Reuters.